Hey everybody, it might be a cold day here in New York, but I am super excited because I'm going to meet with my friend Chelsea from The Financial Diet to talk about all things related to emotional spending. What is it and why do we do it? So let's go find out. Hi Chelsea, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So for those of my audience members who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a writer. I am the founder of a media company called The Financial Diet, part of which is a YouTube channel called The Financial Diet. We're actually in The Financial Diet offices here in Manhattan.
Super cool.
Very excited to be here. And I am someone who used to be very bad with money and is now not at all.
Yeah, and she shares wonderful tips. I will link all of her socials in her channel, and we did videos over on her channel, so you can check those out also.
They're great.
But today, I'm here to talk to you, pick your brain, about emotional spending. I think that I do it sometimes. So how would we define emotional spending for anyone who's wondering what we're talking about?
Basically, emotional spending is going to be any time you're spending money that is linked more to your emotional state than actual needs or even in many cases real wants. It's going to be things like stress spending, anxiety spending, even for some people, like I'm a big one who spends when something really good happens.
Same, rewarding myself.
Constantly. So just generally speaking, anytime a heightened emotional state is going to lead you to spend money in a way that you otherwise would not.
Gotcha. And I'd assume this is way more common, especially though I do know that they've seen an uptick in what we would call impulsive spending or emotional spending because of online, like the ability click. Like Amazon's always like one click to buy. So dangerous.
So dangerous.
Because sometimes I need those like 3 or 4 steps in between want and purchase.
Totally. I recently found myself, you get those like Instagram ads for products and they are compliments to the chef on their targeting because on multiple occasions I've actually bought an item off Instagram and immediately looked at myself in the mirror like, who are you?
Yeah, you're like, what are you doing? Get it together.
Get it together, self.
No, totally. And I mean, I'm just as guilty. I purchased jean shorts that way this summer.
Jorts? A bold woman who buys jorts online.
I know. It was that targeting, super targeted.
So targeted.
And something I do want to distinguish between, just so that we're all on the same page, is that emotional spending is not compulsive spending. When we're talking about like mental health issues, OCD in particular, we can have these obsessions about items or thoughts about what this could mean to us, and we are pushed and pushed and pushed until we feel this compulsion to purchase. And the difference between what Chelsea and I are talking about, emotional spending, and compulsive spending is something that we feel compelled and pushed to do, and it gets in the way of our ability to function in our everyday life. Meaning, like, I might not be able to pay my bills or my rent because I've spent all this money. And so just know that those are 2 separate things. But today we're going to talk about emotional spending.
Yes. Also worth noting that, again, this is similar to compulsive spending. There's also shopping addiction, which is its own thing. Emotional spending tends to be very situational rather than some sort of inborn, issue.
Yeah. And so let's get into it a little bit. I'm curious as to like, what are the reasons someone would emotionally spend?
So again, it's really going to be any time that there is a heightened emotional state that either leaves you really like wanting that jolt of, serotonin and validation and all of those wonderful feelings that spending money buys you, or it's going to be something really good that makes you feel like I have every right to do this. I should do this. I deserve this. But it can be anything from getting, a really bad news into an argument with a loved one, feeling really bad about yourself. I did a video about how I used to spend money constantly on clothes when I was very unhappy with my body. And it would lead me to feel like, I have to, fix this with clothes, essentially. Or it can be you got great news at work, and like, let's say you got news that you got a raise. That money has not hit your bank account yet, but you are more than willing to go spend as if it had. So it's a range of emotions that can lead to emotional spending.
And in your experience, I don't know if you know this at all. We're just going to kind of fly by the seat of our pants, people. But I'm curious what the most common is. There like a few that come to mind?
So one of the biggest drivers is anxiety, social anxiety. And that can be anything from, like myself, not feeling good in your own skin, seeing something that someone else has, Instagram being a huge driver of that for many people. It can be feeling like you don't have something to fit in with other people, or a social pressure to spend. For example, you might be going out with your friends. They want to go to this really fancy cocktail bar that you can't necessarily afford, but it's really, really hard to opt out of that situation, especially if you're you're already out with them and they're like, let's go. And you're going to plunk down your credit card and be like, ooh, that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
So that feeling of anxiety can come in so many different forms, and it can be either internal or it can come from, the people around you. But that is one of those feelings that constantly leads people to spend, because it's a really, really easy short-term solution. It almost lets you just like, relax for a second.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because in a way it's almost like by doing the thing, by spending the money for that brief period, because I do know that when we purchase things, this is very interesting to me, when we purchase items that we've been wanting, or items that maybe we can't really afford, or something we've been looking and lusting after, we get this little spike of like dopamine. It definitely triggers that reward center in our brain.
Can't wait to buy these boots and finally look outside like I feel inside, which is a woman who has sold a book in Azerbaijan.
When I emotionally spend, I'll get this like rise of good feeling, and then all of a sudden it's like a cliff into remorse.
That's huge. And I think a lot of people, for less even just in like a brain chemistry sense, but more in a sense of how we perceive ourselves, making these purchases in a huge way allows you to feel like a different person for a short window of time.
Yeah.
You imagine in making the purchase that that jacket or that couch or whatever it is going to somehow change the person that you are. And it's kind of a short-term fix for what is often a much bigger desire. Again, if it's someone who maybe doesn't feel great with their body, you can buy all the clothes you want, but ultimately for me, starting an exercise regimen that actually changed how I felt about myself was the only real solution. But it can feel like that short-term ability to really be someone else, especially if you feel like you don't like yourself in that moment.
Yeah, I can totally feel that. Like there have been times where I've done the same. Like that's really like tangible for me. So yeah, okay. Now, if you've been sitting there and thinking like, hey, maybe I do this, let's go through some of the most common situations that we think could lead to emotional spending. Because I believe, after like reading about this and talking to Chelsea, I think it's much more common than we actually think.
I don't have the exact data, but I can speculate that 100% of people have engaged in emotional spending at some point. So
yes. Yeah.
Everyone needs help. One of the biggest triggers for people, I think, is going to be just a day that is very bad and exhausting at work. It is really hard when you've had a terrible day at work not to, even if it's just like a bottle of wine and a block of cheese, to get yourself something to kind of wash that feeling away and compensate for it.
Ooh, those rain boots I've been looking at. Oh my God, there's only one left in my size. Ooh, I don't even know if I like that color, but I should get them. Because what if somebody else gets it? How many people are watching this? It's such a good deal. Okay, add to basket. I'm gonna buy it right now. I just did a video about this recently in my Dark Side of Psychology series, where I talk about marketing and like playing into our FOMO, like our fear of missing out, whether it's limited edition, whether it's like, because this has gotten me a few times where I'll be looking like lusting over a pair of shoes, let's say. And when I go to click, it's like only one left in your size. And it's like in red and it has an exclamation point. And I'm like, ugh, only one. How many people are looking at this? And so that would push me to purchase maybe when I wouldn't normally, because I don't want to miss out on that item. And that's definitely an emotional way to think about spending. It's not, do I need this? Do I love it? Is it going to bring me joy if we're Marie Kondoing our life? Instead, I'm purchasing it because I think that there's like scarcity.
And by the way, we talk about that a lot on the channel. We have a whole video about that. Stores are not dumb. They know that people respond to sales.
Yes.
So basically, if you have noticed in the past few years that stores always seem to be having sales, whereas it used to be
Macy's.
Cyclical.
I feel like Macy's always has a sale.
Totally, and that's intentional. They actually bake into their pricing structure the idea of something being sold on sale, because they want to make sure that they can always tantalize you with that idea of getting a better deal. So you no longer have what used to be the case where it's like twice a year, summer and winter.
Yeah.
There were big sales. There are constantly sales going on, and especially with sites like Retail Me Not that allow you to get every coupon code right away, and you can use them at the register too if you show them your phone. You don't have to feel so susceptible to when things are on sale, because they almost certainly either will go on sale again, or you are going to be able to use some kind of coupon for them, and stores plan for that because that's what gets people to buy.
Yeah, interesting, because I do love a good deal, and I'm a sucker for a sale.
But they raise the initial retail price because they know they're going to sell most of it on sale.
So it's really not on sale.
Not really.
Another thing that I find in my practice and in my personal life is the relation to how our parents spent money.
Yeah, Mom, that's why I called you. They're having such a big sale. I know how much you love a good deal. I do too. So I sent you the link, and I'm gonna buy a few because it's just such a good deal. I might sell some on eBay. I don't know. I know. That's why I was telling you. I wanted to call you to make sure that you didn't miss out. Okay, I'll shoot you the link. We can buy a bunch of them. We'll deal with it later. But I just knew you'd love this good deal. Okay. Bye.
I know, like, my mom and I love a good deal, so we will definitely commiserate over, like, oh, there's an extra 30% off, like, get it now, sending links back and forth, talking about it. Do you find that people spend like their parents did? Or is there a way to, like, is that
It's
me
one of
just
two
making it
ways,
up?
right? It's either you really imitate your parents in terms of your spending, or you really, really rebel from your parents in terms of spending. My parents are both extremely thrifty, especially my mother. She's very much like, she'll never pay full price for anything, huge into DIY, huge into, refurbishing, making, going to thrift stores, all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, I was like, I'll never do that. I want to buy what I want to buy.
Like the rebel part
Exactly.
of being a kid where you're like, no.
Exactly. And now I've started to embrace that a lot more in my own life. But for a lot of people, especially if they experience some kind of scarcity at home, or feeling like they didn't have enough, or feeling like they were often denied what they wanted, it can be a reason in adulthood to really dive into that freedom to buy what you want, and often end up just overspending out of that desire to feel like you don't have to say no to yourself. A good litmus test when you're buying something is, am I buying this because of what it says about me, or am I buying this because of how it improves my life?
Interesting.
And don't get me wrong, like, sometimes it's nice to have a pretty looking bag, but if what you want is a pretty looking bag that goes with your closet, you can find that at many price points.
100%.
If you opt to get the pretty bag that also has huge labels emblazoned over it and costs 10 times the price, on some level that you are opting for that one because of what that label says about you.
Yeah.
And those kind of decisions in spending will never enrich your life, because it's diminishing returns, right? Once you've got the beautiful black bag that you can use every day and looks good with your closet, you're done.
Yeah.
That extra stuff on top of it, that is entirely about satiating an external, sort of validation for yourself.
That's just so interesting. It gives me a lot to think about, because if every time I went to purchase something, I considered whether it was going to bring me joy and it was something that was useful and felt good for me, or if it was because I thought that I would be perceived a certain way because I purchased said good.
A symbol of making it is you're financially comfortable, you're secure,
Yeah,
you have
security.
a healthy emergency fund, you have healthy savings. Like, those are symbols of having made it.
Yeah, I agree. And the last thing, and this is something that when I was reading about this in preparation for our talk, I did some research ahead of time, you guys, is that I will do this sometimes where you do it because it's a sense of control. Like, it's like, I don't know why. I think it's like the inner child of me that's very stubborn and likes to stomp her feet and say she can do it. Sometimes I'll just be like, I bought this because I can, and I want to, and I'm in control.
Because I can is the worst reason to buy something.
I know.
It's such
I have
a
a lot of
childish
remorse.
reason.
It is. It's so childish.
It's literally like when you're at the grocery store as a kid and you have like $5 in your pocket and you buy like, the candy because you can. Like, that's what a child does.
Yeah. I don't know why, but every once in a while I'll feel that urge of like, I'm an adult and I can do what I want, which is like, does not equate.
And everyone's definition of what is going to be really satisfying and really worth it to buy is going to be totally different. A lot of people get down on people for spending on food and dining, but I love nothing more than going to a nice restaurant. I love studying that menu for days and fantasizing about it and thinking about it. I love the experience of it. I've never regretted spending money on a good restaurant, but some people, that's totally wasteful. So you have to have a really strong internal compass of what is actually worth it and tune out the noise.
Just to kind of sum it up, if we worry that we struggle with emotional spending, how do we know if maybe it's us?
Couple tips. Obviously, you have, the analysis of why you're buying this item. Is it actually improving your life, or are you doing it for some sort of external reason? Number two, is this a purchase that you have been planning for or thinking about in any capacity? Because generally speaking, if it's something you're doing kind of at the, in the heat of the moment, that's going to be more tied to your emotional state than anything else. A really good barrier for that is make sure that any purchase you're going to make, outside of like, a candy bar or something, that you hold on for at least 24 hours. And you come back to it 24 hours later. If you still want it in the clear light of day, that's probably an indication that it's worth it. Another thing to do is to go back through your bank statement statements and card statements and highlight every purchase you don't remember making, because that is almost certainly a purchase that's going to have been made for impulsive reasons and not worth making again because it clearly didn't have value for you.
And is buyer's remorse like an indication of emotional spending? Because that was like my first red flag. I was like, if the next day or in an hour after purchasing, you're like, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Yes, there are going to be a lot of times, and those are the worst purchases, when you even an hour later can see how dumb that was. But for a lot of people, you're not necessarily always going to experience that acute sense of remorse. So remembering that also just not remembering the purchase or not having gotten any value out of it is also a sign that it was a bad purchase.
Okay, good.
It doesn't have to be actively remorse. It just has to be, what value did this create in my life? And if it's not even memorable enough to be able to identify that purchase, it did not create value for you.
So just pay attention. Take note. Yeah, are we buying things impulsively and then having remorse right away? Are we doing it because we think that someone else is gonna think we look cooler, more successful, wealthier because of it? Take note. And hopefully this was helpful, because I think 100% of people have emotionally spent. I'm guilty of it. But thank you for sharing all of your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Helpful. And like I said, we did videos over on Chelsea's channel, The Financial Diet. I will link it in the description. Check it out. I hope you guys really enjoy it. We answered a lot of your questions that they offered on Instagram that people asked. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And we will see you next time. Bye.